"That I cannot deny," answered the bird. "But although what you now ask is more difficult than all the rest, yet I will do it for you. Cast your eyes around," added he, "and look if you can see a little pitcher." "I see it already," said the princess. "Take it then," said he, "and as you descend the mountain, sprinkle a little of the water that is in it upon every black stone." The princess took up the pitcher accordingly, carried with her the cage and bird, the flagon of golden water, and the branch of the singing tree, and as she descended the mountain, threw a little of the water on every black stone, which was changed immediately into a man. And as she did not miss one stone, all the horses, both of her brothers and of the other gentlemen, resumed their natural forms also. She instantly recognized Bahman and Parviz, as they did her, and ran to embrace her. She returned their embraces and expressed her amazement. "What do you here, my dear brothers?" said she, and they told her they had been asleep. "Yes," replied she, "and if it had not been for me, perhaps you might have slept till the day of judgment. Do not you remember that you came to fetch the talking bird, the singing tree, and the golden water? And did not you see as you came along the place covered with black stones? Look and see if there be any now. The gentlemen and their horses who surround us, and you yourselves, were these black stones. If you desire to know how this wonder was performed," continued she, showing the pitcher, which she set down at the foot of the mountain, "it was done by virtue of the water which was in this pitcher, with which I sprinkled every stone. After I had made the talking bird, which you see in this cage, my slave, by his directions I found out the singing tree, a branch of which I have now in my hand, and the golden water, with which this flagon is filled. But being still unwilling to return without taking you with me, I constrained the bird by the power I had over him to afford me the means. He told me where to find this pitcher, and the use I was to make of it." The Princes Bahman and Parviz learned by this relation the obligation they had to their sister, as did all the other gentlemen, who expressed to her that, far from envying her happiness in the conquest she had made, and which they all had aspired to, they thought they could not better express their gratitude for restoring them to life again than by declaring themselves her slaves, and that they were ready to obey her in whatever she should command. "Gentlemen," replied the princess, "if you had given any attention to my words, you might have observed that I had no other intention in what I have done than to recover my brothers. Therefore, if you have received any benefit, you owe me no obligation, and I have no further share in your compliment than your politeness toward me, for which I return you my thanks. In other respects I regard each of you as quite as free as you were before your misfortunes, and I rejoice with you at the happiness which has accrued to you by my means. Let us, however, stay no longer in a place where we have nothing to detain us, but mount our horses and return to our respective homes." The princess took her horse, which stood in the place where she had left him. Before she mounted, Prince Bahman desired her to give him the cage to carry. "Brother," replied the princess, "the bird is my slave, and I will carry him myself. If you will take the pains to carry the branch of the singing tree, there it is. Only hold the cage while I get on horseback." When she had mounted her horse, and Prince Bahman had given her the cage, she turned about and said to Prince Parviz, "I leave the flagon of golden water to your care, if it will not be too much trouble for you to carry it." And Prince Parviz accordingly took charge of it with pleasure. When Bahman, Parviz, and all the gentlemen had mounted their horses, the princess waited for some of them to lead the way. The two princes paid that compliment to the gentlemen, and they again to the princess, who, finding that none of them would accept the honor, but that it was reserved for her, addressed herself to them and said, "Gentlemen, I expect that some of you should lead the way." To which one who was nearest to her in the name of the rest replied, "Madam, were we ignorant of the respect due to your sex, yet after what you have done for us there is no deference we would not willingly pay you, notwithstanding your modesty. We entreat you no longer to deprive us of the happiness of following you." "Gentlemen," said the princess, "I do not deserve the honor you do me, and accept it only because you desire it." At the same time she led the way, and the two princes and the gentleman followed. This illustrious company called upon the dervish as they passed to thank him for his reception and wholesome advice, which they had all found to be sincere. He was dead, however, whether of old age or because he was no longer necessary to show the way to obtaining the 3 rarities, did not appear. They pursued their route, but lessened in their numbers every day. The gentlemen, who, as we said before, had come from different countries, after severally repeating their obligations to the princess and her brothers, took leave of them one after another as they approached the road by which they had come. As soon as the princess reached home, she placed the cage in the garden, and the bird no sooner began to warble than he was surrounded by nightingales, chaffinches, larks, linnets, goldfinches, and every species of birds of the country. The branch of the singing tree was no sooner set in the midst of the parterre, a little distance from the house, than it took root, and in a short time became a large tree, the leaves of which gave as harmonious a concert as those of the parent from which it was gathered. A large basin of beautiful marble was placed in the garden, and when it was finished, the princess poured into it all the golden water from the flagon, which instantly increased and swelled so much that it soon reached up to the edges of the basin, and afterward formed in the middle a fountain 20 feet high, which fell again into the basin perpetually, without running over. The report of these wonders was presently spread abroad, and as the gates of the house and those of the gardens were shut to nobody, a great number of people came to admire them. Some days after, when the Princes Bahman and Parviz had recovered from the fatigue of their journey, they resumed their former way of living, and as their usual diversion was hunting, they mounted their horses, and went for the first time since their return, not to their own domain, but 2 or 3 leagues from their house. As they pursued their sport, the Emperor of Persia came in pursuit of game upon the same ground. When they perceived, by the number of horsemen in different places, that he would soon be up, they resolved to discontinue their chase, and retire to avoid encountering him. But in the very road they took, they chanced to meet him in so narrow a way that they could not retreat without being seen. In their surprise, they had only time to alight and prostrate themselves before the Emperor, without lifting up their heads to look at him. The Emperor, who saw they were as well mounted and dressed as if they had belonged to his court, had a curiosity to see their faces. He stopped and commanded them to rise. The princes rose up and stood before him with an easy and graceful air, accompanied with modest countenances. The Emperor took some time to view them before he spoke, and after he had admired their good air and mien, asked them who they were and where they lived. "Sir," said Prince Bahman, "we are the sons of the late intendant of your Majesty's gardens, and live in a house which he built a little before he died, till we should be fit to serve your Majesty and ask of you some employ when opportunity offered." "By what I perceive," replied the Emperor, "you love hunting." "Sir," replied Prince Bahman, "it is our common exercise, and what none of your Majesty's subjects who intend to bear arms in your armies ought, according to the ancient custom of the kingdom, to neglect." The Emperor, charmed with so prudent an answer, said, "Since it is so, I should be glad to see your expertness in the chase. Choose your own game." The princes mounted their horses again and followed the Emperor, but had not gone far before they saw many wild beasts together. Prince Bahman chose a lion and Prince Parviz a bear, and pursued them with so much intrepidity that the Emperor was surprised. They came up with their game nearly at the same time, and darted their javelins with so much skill and address that they pierced the one the lion and the other the bear so effectually that the Emperor saw them fall one after the other. Immediately afterward Prince Bahman pursued another bear, and Prince Parviz another lion, and killed them in a short time, and would have beaten out for fresh game, but the Emperor would not let them, and sent to them to come to him. When they approached, he said, "If I had given you leave, you would soon have destroyed all my game. But it is not that which I would preserve, but your persons. For I am so well assured your bravery may one time or other be serviceable to me, that from this moment your lives will be always dear to me." The emperor, in short, conceived so great a kindness for the two princes that he invited them immediately to make him a visit, to which Prince Bahman replied, "Your Majesty does us an honor we do not deserve, and we beg you will excuse us." The emperor, who could not comprehend what reason the princes could have to refuse this token of his favor, pressed them to tell him why they excused themselves. "Sir," said Prince Bahman, "we have a sister younger than ourselves, with whom we live in such perfect union that we undertake nothing before we consult her, nor she anything without asking our advice." "I commend your brotherly affection," answered the emperor. "Consult your sister. Meet me tomorrow and give me an answer." The princes went home, but neglected to speak of their adventure in meeting the emperor and hunting with him, and also of the honor he had done them, yet did not the next morning fail to meet him at the place appointed. "Well," said the emperor, "have you spoken to your sister, and has she consented to the pleasure I expect of seeing you?" The two princes looked at each other and blushed. "Sir," said Prince Bahman, "we beg your Majesty to excuse us, for both my brother and I forgot." "Then remember today," replied the emperor, "and be sure to bring me an answer tomorrow." The princes were guilty of the same fault a second time, and the emperor was so good-natured as to forgive their negligence. But to prevent their forgetfulness the third time, he pulled 3 little golden balls out of a purse, and put them into Prince Bahman's bosom. "These balls," said he, smiling, "will prevent your forgetting a third time what I wish you to do for my sake, since the noise they will make by falling on the floor when you undress will remind you, if you do not recollect it before." The event happened just as the emperor foresaw, and without these balls the princes had not thought of speaking to their sister of this affair, for as Prince Bahman unloosed his girdle to go to bed, the balls dropped on the floor, upon which he ran into Prince Parviz's chamber, when both went into the Princess Parizade's apartment, and after they had asked her pardon for coming at so unseasonable a time, they told her all the circumstances of their meeting the emperor. The princess was somewhat surprised at this intelligence. "Your meeting with the emperor," said she, "is happy and honorable, and may in the end be highly advantageous to you, but it places me in an awkward position. It was on my account, I know, you refused the emperor, and I am infinitely obliged to you for doing so. I know by this that you would rather be guilty of incivility toward the emperor than violate the union we have sworn to each other. You judge right, for if you had once gone, you would insensibly have been engaged to devote yourselves to him. But do you think it an easy matter absolutely to refuse the emperor what he seems so earnestly to desire? Monarchs will be obeyed in their desires, and it may be dangerous to oppose them. Therefore, if to follow my inclination I should dissuade you from obeying him, it may expose you to his resentment, and may render myself and you miserable. These are my sentiments, but before we conclude upon anything, let us consult the talking bird and hear what he says. He is penetrating, and has promised his assistance in all difficulties." The princess sent for the cage, and after she had related the circumstances to the bird in the presence of her brothers, asked him what they should do in this perplexity. The bird answered, "The princes, your brothers, must conform to the emperor's pleasure, and in their turn invite him to come and see your house." "But, bird," replied the princess, "my brothers and I love one another, and our friendship is yet undisturbed. Will not this step be injurious to that friendship?" "Not at all," replied the bird. "It will tend rather to cement it." "Then," answered the princess, "the emperor will see me." The bird told her it was necessary he should, and that everything would go better afterward. Next morning the princes met the emperor hunting, who asked them if they had remembered to speak to their sister. Prince Bahman approached and answered, "Sir, we are ready to obey you, for we have not only obtained our sister's consent with great ease, but she took it amiss that we should pay her that deference in a matter wherein our duty to your majesty was concerned. If we have offended, we hope you will pardon us." "Do not be uneasy," replied the emperor. "I highly approve of your conduct, and hope you will have the same deference and attachment to my person, if I have ever so little share in your friendship." The princes, confounded at the emperor's goodness, returned no other answer but a low obeisance. The emperor, contrary to his usual custom, did not hunt long that day. Presuming that the princes possessed wit equal to their courage and bravery, he longed with impatience to converse with them more at liberty. He made them ride on each side of him, an honour which was envied by the Grand Vizier, who was much mortified to see them preferred before him. When the emperor entered his capital, the eyes of the people, who stood in crowds in the streets, were fixed upon the two princes, Bahman and Parviz, and they were earnest to know who they might be. All, however, agreed in wishing that the emperor had been blessed with two such handsome princes, and said that his children would have been about the same age, if the queen had not been so unfortunate as to lose them. The first thing the emperor did when he arrived at his palace was to conduct the princes into the principal apartments, who praised without affectation the beauty and symmetry of the rooms, and the richness of the furniture and ornaments. Afterward a magnificent repast was served up, and the emperor made them sit with him, which they at first refused, but finding it was his pleasure, they obeyed. The emperor, who had himself much learning, particularly in history, foresaw that the princes, out of modesty and respect, would not take the liberty of beginning any conversation. Therefore, to give them an opportunity, he furnished them with subjects all dinner-time. But whatever subject he introduced, they showed so much wit, judgment, and discernment that he was struck with admiration. "Were these my own children," said he to himself, "and had I improved their talents by suitable education, they could not have been more accomplished or better informed." In short, he took such great pleasure in their conversation that after having sat longer than usual, he led them into his closet, where he pursued his conversation with them, and at last said, "I never supposed that there were among my subjects in the country youths so well brought up, so lively, so capable, and I never was better pleased with any conversation than yours. But it is time now we should relax our minds with some diversion, and as nothing is more capable of enlivening the mind than music, you shall hear a vocal and instrumental concert, which may not be disagreeable to you." The emperor had no sooner spoken than the musicians, who had orders to attend, entered, and answered fully the expectations the princes had been led to entertain of their abilities. After the concerts an excellent farce was acted, and the entertainment was concluded by dancers of both sexes. The two princes, seeing night approach, prostrated themselves at the emperor's feet, and having first thanked him for the favours and honours he had heaped upon them, asked his permission to retire, which was granted by the emperor, who in dismissing them said, "I give you leave to go, but remember, you will be always welcome, and the oftener you come, the greater pleasure you will do me." Before they went out of the emperor's presence, Prince Bahman said, "Sir, may we presume to request that your majesty will do us and our sister the honour to pass by our house, and refresh yourself after your fatigue, the first time you take the diversion of hunting in that neighbourhood? It is not worthy of your presence, but monarchs sometimes have vouchsafed to take shelter in a cottage." "My children," replied the emperor, "your house cannot be otherwise than beautiful and worthy of its owners. I will call and see it with pleasure, which will be the greater for having for my hosts you and your sister, who is already dear to me from the account you give me of the rare qualities with which she is endowed. And this satisfaction I will defer no longer than tomorrow. Early in the morning I will be at the place where I shall never forget that I first saw you. Meet me, and you shall be my guides." When the Princes Bahman and Parviz had returned home, they gave the princess an account of the distinguished reception the emperor had given them, and told her that they had invited him to do them the honor, as he passed by, to call at their house, and that he had appointed the next day. "If it be so," replied the princess, "we must think of preparing a repast fit for his majesty. And for that purpose I think it would be proper we should consult the talking bird, who will tell us perhaps what meats the emperor likes best." The princess approved of her plan, and after they had retired, she consulted the bird alone. "Bird," said she, "the emperor will do us the honor tomorrow to come and see our house, and we are to entertain him. Tell us what we shall do to acquit ourselves to his satisfaction." "Good mistress," replied the bird, "you have excellent cooks. Let them do the best they can, but above all things, let them prepare a dish of cucumbers stuffed full of pearls, which must be set before the emperor in the first course, before all the other dishes." "Cucumbers stuffed with pearls?" cried Princess Parizade with amazement. "Surely, bird, you do not know what you say. It is an unheard-of dish. The emperor may admire it as a piece of magnificence, but he will sit down to eat, and not to admire pearls. Besides, all the pearls I possess are not enough for such a dish." "Mistress," said the bird, "do what I say, and be not uneasy about what may happen. Nothing but good will follow. As for the pearls, go early tomorrow morning to the foot of the first tree on your right hand in the park, dig under it, and you will find more than you want." That night the princess ordered a gardener to be ready to attend her, and the next morning early led him to the tree which the bird had told her of, and bade him dig at its foot. When the gardener came to a certain depth, he found some resistance to the spade, and presently discovered a gold box about a foot square, which he showed the princess. "This," said she, "is what I brought you for. Take care not to injure it with the spade." When the gardener took up the box, he gave it into the princess's hands, who, as it was only fastened with neat little hasps, soon opened it, and found it full of pearls of a moderate size, but equal and fit for the use that was to be made of them. Very well satisfied with having found this treasure, after she had shut the box again, she put it under her arm and went back to the house, while the gardener threw the earth into the hole at the foot of the tree as it had been before. The Princes Bahman and Parviz, who, as they were dressing themselves in their own apartments, saw their sister in the garden earlier than usual, as soon as they could get out, went to her, and met her as she was returning with a gold box under her arm, which much surprised them. "Sister," said Bahman, "you carried nothing with you when we saw you before with the gardener, and now we see you have a golden box. Is this some treasure found by the gardener, and did he come and tell you of it?" "No, brother," answered the princess. "I took the gardener to the place where this casket was concealed and showed him where to dig. But you will be more amazed when you see what it contains." The princess opened the box, and when the princes saw that it was full of pearls, which though small were of great value, they asked her how she came to the knowledge of this treasure. "Brothers," said she, "come with me and I will tell you." The princess, as they returned to the house, gave them an account of her having consulted the bird, as they had agreed she should, and the answer he had given her, the objections she had raised to preparing a dish of cucumbers stuffed full of pearls, and how he had told her where to find this box. The sister and brothers formed many conjectures to penetrate into what the bird could mean by ordering them to prepare such a dish, but after much conversation they agreed to follow his advice exactly. As soon as the princess entered the house, she called for the head cook, and after she had given him directions about the entertainment for the emperor, said to him, "Besides all this, you must dress an extraordinary dish for the emperor's own eating, which nobody else must have anything to do with besides yourself. This dish must be of cucumbers stuffed with these pearls." And at the same time she opened him the box and showed him the jewels. The chief cook, who had never heard of such a dish, started back, and showed his thoughts by his looks, which the princess, penetrating, said, "I see you take me to be mad to order such a dish, which one may say with certainty was never made. I know this as well as you, but I am not mad, and give you these orders with the most perfect recollection. You must invent and do the best you can, and bring me back what pearls are left." The cook could make no reply, but took the box and retired, and afterward the princess gave directions to all the domestics to have everything in order, both in the house and gardens, to receive the emperor. Next day the two princes went to the place appointed, and as soon as the emperor of Persia arrived, the chase began and lasted till the heat of the sun obliged him to leave off. While Prince Bahman stayed to conduct the emperor to their house, Prince Parviz rode before to show the way, and when he came in sight of the house, spurred his horse to inform the princess that the emperor was approaching. But she had been told by some servants whom she had placed to give notice, and the prince found her waiting, ready to receive him. When the emperor had entered the courtyard and alighted at the portico, the princess came and threw herself at his feet, and the two princes informed him she was their sister, and besought him to accept her respects. The emperor stooped to raise her, and after he had gazed some time on her beauty, struck with her fine person and dignified air, he said, "The brothers are worthy of the sister, and she worthy of them, since, if I may judge of her understanding by her person, I am not amazed that the brothers would do nothing without their sister's consent. But," added he, "I hope to be better acquainted with you, my daughter, after I have seen the house." "Sir," said the princess, "it is only a plain country residence, fit for such people as we are, who live retired from the great world. It is not to be compared with the magnificent palaces of emperors." "I cannot perfectly agree with you in opinion," said the emperor very obligingly, "for its first appearance makes me suspect you. However, I will not pass my judgment upon it till I have seen it all. Therefore be pleased to conduct me through the apartments." The princess led the emperor through all the rooms except the hall, and after he had considered them very attentively and admired their variety, "My daughter," said he to the princess, "do you call this a country house? The finest and largest cities would soon be deserted if all country houses were like yours. I am no longer surprised that you despise the town. Now let me see the garden, which I doubt not is answerable to the house." The princess opened a door which led into the garden, and the first object which presented itself to the emperor's view was the golden fountain. Surprised at so rare an object, he asked from whence that wonderful water which gave so much pleasure to behold had been procured, where was its source, and by what art it was made to play so high. He said he would presently take a nearer view of it. The princess then led him to the spot where the harmonious tree was planted, and there the emperor heard a concert, different from all he had ever heard before, and stopping to see where the musicians were, he could discern nobody far or near, but still distinctly heard the music which ravished his senses. "My daughter," said he to the princess, "where are the musicians whom I hear? Are they underground, or invisible in the air? Such excellent performers will hazard nothing by being seen. On the contrary, they would please the more." "Sir," answered the princess, smiling, "they are not musicians, but the leaves of the tree your majesty sees before you, which form this concert. And if you will give yourself the trouble to go a little nearer, you will be convinced, and the voices will be the more distinct." The emperor went nearer, and was so charmed with the sweet harmony that he would never have been tired with hearing it, but that his desire to have a nearer view of the fountain of golden water forced him away. "Daughter," said he, "tell me, I pray you, whether this wonderful tree was found in your garden by chance, or was a present made to you, or have you procured it from some foreign country? It must certainly have come from a great distance. Otherwise, curious as I am after natural rarities, I should have heard of it. What name do you call it by?" "Sir," replied the princess, "this tree has no other name than that of the singing tree, and is not a native of this country. It would at present take up too much time to tell your Majesty by what adventures it came here. Its history is connected with the golden water and the talking bird, which came to me at the same time, and which your Majesty may presently see. But if it be agreeable to your Majesty, after you have rested yourself and recovered the fatigue of hunting, which must be the greater because of the sun's intense heat, I will do myself the honour of relating it to you." "My daughter," replied the Emperor, "my fatigue is so well recompensed by the wonderful things you have shown me that I do not feel it in the least. Let me see the golden water, for I am impatient to see and admire afterward the talking bird." When the Emperor came to the golden water, his eyes were fixed so steadfastly upon the fountain that he could not take them off. At last, addressing himself to the Princess, he said, "As you tell me, daughter, that this water has no spring or communication, I conclude that it is foreign, as well as the singing tree." "Sir," replied the Princess, "it is as your Majesty conjectures. And to let you know that this water has no communication with any spring, I must inform you that the basin is one entire stone, so that the water cannot come in at the sides or underneath. But what your Majesty will think most wonderful is that all this water proceeded but from one small flagon, emptied into this basin, which increased to the quantity you see by a property peculiar to itself, and formed this fountain." "Well," said the Emperor, going from the fountain, "this is enough for one time. I promise myself the pleasure to come and visit it often, but now let us go and see the talking bird." As he went toward the hall, the Emperor perceived a prodigious number of singing birds in the trees around, filling the air with their songs and warblings, and asked why there were so many there, and none on the other trees in the garden. "The reason, sir," answered the Princess, "is because they come from all parts to accompany the song of the talking bird, which your Majesty may see in a cage in one of the windows of the hall we are approaching. And if you attend, you will perceive that his notes are sweeter than those of any of the other birds, even the nightingales." The Emperor went into the hall, and as the bird continued singing, the Princess raised her voice and said, "My slave, here is the Emperor. Pay your compliments to him." The bird left off singing that instant, when all the other birds ceased also, and said, "The Emperor is welcome. God prosper him and prolong his life." As the entertainment was served on the sofa near the window where the bird was placed, the Sultan replied as he was taking his seat, "Bird, I thank you, and am overjoyed to find in you the Sultan and King of birds." As soon as the Emperor saw the dish of cucumbers set before him, thinking they were prepared in the best manner, he reached out his hand and took one. But when he cut it, was in extreme surprise to find it stuffed with pearls. "What novelty is this?" said he. "And with what design were these cucumbers stuffed thus with pearls, since pearls are not to be eaten?" He looked at his hosts to ask them the meaning, when the bird, interrupting him, said, "Can your Majesty be in such great astonishment at cucumbers stuffed with pearls, which you see with your own eyes, and yet so easily believe that the Queen, your wife, gave birth to a dog, a cat, and a piece of wood?" "I believed those things," replied the Emperor, "because the attendants assured me of the facts." "Those attendants, sir," replied the bird, "were the Queen's 2 sisters, who, envious of her happiness in being preferred by your Majesty before them, to satisfy their envy and revenge, have abused your Majesty's credulity. If you interrogate them, they will confess their crime. The 2 brothers and the sister whom you see before you are your own children, whom they exposed, and who were taken in by the intendant of your gardens, who provided nurses for them and took care of their education." This speech presently cleared up the Emperor's understanding. "Bird," cried he, "I believe the truth which you discover to me. The inclination which drew me to them told me plainly they must be of my own blood. Come, then, my sons, come, my daughter, let me embrace you, and give you the first marks of a father's love and tenderness." The emperor then rose, and after having embraced the two princes and the princess, and mingled his tears with theirs, said, "It is not enough, my children. You must embrace each other, not as the children of the intendant of my gardens, to whom I have been so much obliged for preserving your lives, but as my own children, of the royal blood of the monarchs of Persia, whose glory I am persuaded you will maintain." After the two princes and the princess had embraced mutually with new satisfaction, the emperor sat down again with them, and finished his meal in haste, and when he had done, said, "My children, you see in me your father. Tomorrow I will bring the queen your mother, therefore prepare to receive her." The emperor afterward mounted his horse and returned with expedition to his capital. The first thing he did, as soon as he had alighted and entered his palace, was to command the Grand Vizier to seize the queen's two sisters. They were taken from their houses separately, convicted, and condemned to death, which sentence was put in execution within an hour. In the meantime, the Emperor Khosrow Shah, followed by all the lords of his court who were then present, went on foot to the door of the great mosque, and after he had taken the queen out of the strict confinement she had languished under for so many years, embracing her in the miserable condition to which she was then reduced, said to her with tears in his eyes, "I come to entreat your pardon for the injustice I have done you, and to make you the reparation I ought, which I have begun by punishing the unnatural wretches who put the abominable cheat upon me. And I hope you will look upon it as complete when I present to you two accomplished princes and a lovely princess, our children. Come and resume your former rank, with all the honors which are your due." All this was done and said before great crowds of people who flocked from all parts at the first news of what was happening, and immediately spread the joyful intelligence through the city. Next morning early, the emperor and queen, whose mournful, humiliating dress was changed for magnificent robes, went with all their court to the house built by the intendant of the gardens, where the emperor presented the princes Bahman and Perviz, and the princess Scheherazade, to their enraptured mother. "These, much injured wife," said he, "are the two princes your sons, and the princess your daughter. Embrace them with the same tenderness I have done, since they are worthy both of me and you." The tears flowed plentifully down their cheeks at these tender embraces, especially the queen's, from the comfort and joy of having two such princes for her sons, and such a princess for her daughter, on whose account she had so long endured the severest afflictions. The two princes and the princess had prepared a magnificent repast for the emperor and queen and their court. As soon as that was over, the emperor led the queen into the garden, and showed her the harmonious tree and the beautiful effect of the golden fountain. She had seen the bird in his cage, and the emperor had spared no panegyric in his praise during the repast. When there was nothing to detain the emperor any longer, he took horse, and with the princes Bahman and Perviz on his right hand, and the queen consort and the princess at his left, preceded and followed by all the officers of his court, according to their rank, returned to his capital. Crowds of people came out to meet them, and with acclamations of joy ushered them into the city, where all eyes were fixed not only upon the queen and her royal children, but also upon the bird, which the princess carried before her in his cage, admiring his sweet notes, which had drawn all the other birds about him, and followed him flying from tree to tree in the country, and from one housetop to another in the city. The princes Bahman and Perviz and the princess Scheherazade were at length brought to the palace with pomp, and nothing was to be seen or heard all that night but illuminations and rejoicings, both in the palace and in the utmost parts of the city, which lasted many days, and were continued throughout the empire of Persia, as intelligence of the joyful event reached the several provinces. The Story of the Fisherman and the Genie. There was once an aged fisherman who was so poor that he could scarcely earn as much as would maintain himself, his wife, and 3 children. He went every day to fish betimes in the morning, and imposed it as a law upon himself not to cast his nets above 4 times a day. He went one morning by moonlight, and coming to the seaside, undressed himself and cast in his nets. As he drew them toward the shore, he found them very heavy, and thought he had a good draught of fish, at which he rejoiced. But a moment after, perceiving that instead of fish his net contained nothing but the carcass of an ass, he was much vexed. When he had mended his nets, which the carcass of the ass had broken in several places, he threw them in a second time, and when he drew them found a great deal of resistance, which made him think he had taken abundance of fish. But he found nothing except a basket full of gravel and slime, which grieved him extremely. "Oh, Fortune," cried he, with a lamentable tone, "be not angry with me, nor persecute a wretch who prays thee to spare him. I came hither from my house to seek for my livelihood, and thou pronouncest against me a sentence of death. I have no other trade but this to subsist by, and notwithstanding all my care, I can scarcely provide what is necessary for my family. But I am to blame to complain of thee. Thou takest pleasure to persecute honest people, and advancest those who have no virtue to recommend them." Having finished this complaint, he fretfully threw away the basket, and washing his nets from the slime, cast them a 3rd time, but brought up nothing except stones, shells, and mud. No language can express his disappointment. He was almost distracted. However, when day began to appear, he did not forget to say his prayers like a good Mussulman, and he added to them this petition: "Lord, thou knowest that I cast my nets only 4 times a day. I have already drawn them 3 times, without the least reward for my labor. I am only to cast them once more. I pray thee to render the sea favorable to me, as thou didst to Moses." The fisherman, having finished this prayer, cast his nets the 4th time, and when he thought it was proper, drew them as formerly with great difficulty, but instead of fish, found nothing in them but a vessel of yellow copper, which from its weight seemed not to be empty, and he observed that it was fastened and closed with lead, having the impression of a seal upon it. This turn of fortune rejoiced him. "I will sell it," said he, "to the founder, and with the money buy a measure of corn." He examined the vessel on all sides, and shook it to see if its contents made any noise, but heard nothing. This circumstance, with the impression of the seal upon the cover, made him think it enclosed something precious. To try this, he took a knife and opened it with very little labor. He turned the mouth downward, but nothing came out, which surprised him extremely. He placed it before him, but while he viewed it attentively, there burst forth a very thick smoke, which obliged him to retire 2 or 3 paces back. The smoke ascended to the clouds, and extending itself along the sea and upon the shore, formed a great mist, which filled the fisherman with astonishment. When the smoke was all out of the vessel, it reunited, and became a solid body, of which was formed a genie twice as high as the greatest of giants. At the sight of such a monster, the fisherman would fain have fled, but was so frightened that he could not move. "Solomon!" cried the genie immediately. "Solomon, the great prophet, pardon, pardon! I will never more oppose your will. I will obey all your commands." The fisherman, when he heard these words of the genie, recovered his courage, and said to him, "Thou proud spirit, what is it you say? It is above 1800 years since the prophet Solomon died, and we are now at the end of time. Tell me your history, and how you came to be shut up in this vessel." The genie, turning to the fisherman with a fierce look, said, "Thou must address me with more courtesy. Thou art a presumptuous fellow to call me a proud spirit. Speak to me more respectfully, or I will kill thee." "Ah," replied the fisherman, "why should you kill me? Did I not just now set you at liberty? And have you already forgotten my services?" "No, I remember it," said the genie. "But that shall not save thy life. I have only one favour to grant thee." "And what is that?" asked the fisherman. "It is," answered the genie, "to give thee thy choice in what manner thou wouldst have me put thee to death." "But wherein have I offended you?" demanded the fisherman. "Is that your reward for the service I have rendered you?" "I cannot treat thee otherwise," said the genie. "And that thou mayest know the reason, hearken to my story. I am one of those rebellious spirits that opposed the will of Solomon, the son of David, and to avenge himself, that monarch sent Asaph, the son of Barachiah, his chief minister, to apprehend me. Asaph seized my person and brought me by force before his master's throne. Solomon commanded me to acknowledge his power and to submit to his commands. I bravely refused and told him I would rather expose myself to his resentment than swear fealty as he required. To punish me, he shut me up in this copper vessel, and that I might not break my prison, he himself stamped upon this leaden cover his seal with the great name of God engraven upon it. He then gave the vessel to one of the genies who had submitted, with orders to throw me into the sea. During the first 100 years of my imprisonment, I swore that if anyone should deliver me before the expiration of that period, I would make him rich, even after his death. But that century ran out, and nobody did me the good office. During the second, I made an oath that I would open all the treasures of the earth to anyone that might set me at liberty, but with no better success. In the third, I promised to make my deliverer a potent monarch, and to grant him every day 3 requests of what nature soever they might be. But this century passed as well as the 2 former, and I continued in prison. At last, being angry to find myself a prisoner so long, I swore that if afterward anyone should deliver me, I would kill him without mercy, and grant him no favour but to choose the manner of his death. And therefore, since thou hast delivered me today, I give thee that choice." This discourse afflicted the fisherman extremely. "I am very unfortunate," cried he, "to come hither to do such a kindness to one that is so ungrateful. I beg you to consider your injustice, and revoke such an unreasonable oath. Pardon me, and heaven will pardon you. If you grant me my life, heaven will protect you from all attempts against your own." "No, thy death is resolved on," said the genie. "Only choose in what manner thou wilt die." The fisherman, perceiving the genie to be resolute, was extremely grieved, not so much for himself as on account of his 3 children, and bewailed the misery they must be reduced to by his death. He endeavoured still to appease the genie, and said, "Alas! Be pleased to take pity on me in consideration of the service I have done you." "I have told thee already," replied the genie. "It is for that very reason I must kill thee." "That is strange," said the fisherman. "Are you resolved to reward good with evil? The proverb truly says, 'He who does good to one who deserves it not is always ill rewarded.'" "Do not lose time," interrupted the genie. "All thy chattering shall not divert me from my purpose. Make haste, and tell me what kind of death thou preferest." Necessity is the mother of invention. The fisherman bethought himself of a stratagem. "Since I must die, then," said he to the genie, "I submit to the will of heaven. But before I choose the manner of my death, I conjure you by the great name which was engraven upon the seal of the prophet Solomon to answer me truly the question I am going to ask you." The genie, finding himself obliged to a positive answer by this adjuration, trembled, and replied to the fisherman, "Ask what thou wilt, but make haste." The genie having thus promised to speak the truth, the fisherman said to him, "I wish to know if you were actually in this vessel. Dare you swear it by the name of the great God?" "Yes," replied the genie, "I do swear by his great name that I was." "In good faith," answered the fisherman, "I cannot believe you. The vessel is not capable of holding one of your size, and how should it be possible that your whole body could lie in it?" "I swear to thee, notwithstanding," replied the genie, "that I was there just as you see me here. Is it possible that thou dost not believe me after the solemn oath I have taken?" "Truly, not I," said the fisherman. "Nor will I believe you, unless you go into the vessel again." Upon this, the body of the genie dissolved and changed itself into smoke, extending as before upon the seashore, and at last being collected, it began to re-enter the vessel, which it continued to do by a slow and equal motion till no part remained out, when immediately a voice came forth, which said to the fisherman, "Well, incredulous fellow, dost thou not believe me now?" The fisherman, instead of answering the genie, took the cover of lead, and having speedily replaced it on the vessel, "Genie," cried he, "now it is your turn to beg my favour, and to choose which way I shall put you to death. But it is better that I should throw you into the sea, whence I took you, and then I will build a house upon the shore, where I will reside, and give notice to all fishermen who come to throw in their nets, to beware of such a wicked genie as you are, who have made an oath to kill him that shall set you at liberty." The genie, enraged at these expressions, struggled to free himself, but it was impossible, for the impression of Solomon's seal prevented him. Perceiving that the fisherman had the advantage of him, he thought fit to dissemble his anger. "Fisherman," said he, "take heed you do not what you threaten, for what I spoke to you was only by way of jest." "O genie," replied the fisherman, "thou who wast but a moment ago the greatest of all genies, and now art the least of them, thy crafty discourse will signify nothing. To the sea thou shalt return. If thou hast been there already so long as thou hast told me, thou mayest very well stay there till the day of judgment. I begged of thee, in God's name, not to take away my life, and thou didst reject my prayers. I am obliged to treat thee in the same manner." The genie omitted nothing that he thought likely to prevail with the fisherman. "Open the vessel," said he. "Give me my liberty, and I promise to satisfy you to your own content." "Thou art a traitor," replied the fisherman. "I should deserve to lose my life, if I were such a fool as to trust thee." "My good fisherman," replied the genie, "I conjure you once more not to be guilty of such cruelty. Consider that it is not good to avenge one's self, and that on the other hand it is commendable to do good for evil. Do not treat me as Imama formerly treated Ateka." "And what did Imama to Ateka?" inquired the fisherman. "Ho!" cried the genie. "If you have a mind to be informed, open the vessel. Do you think that I can be in a humour to relate stories in so strait a prison? I will tell you as many as you please, when you have let me out." "No," said the fisherman, "I will not let thee out. It is in vain to talk of it. I am just going to throw thee into the bottom of the sea." "Hear me one word more," cried the genie. "I promise to do you no hurt. Nay, far from that. I will show you a way to become exceedingly rich." The hope of delivering himself from poverty prevailed with the fisherman. "I could listen to thee," said he, "were there any credit to be given to thy word. Swear to me by the great name of God that thou wilt faithfully perform what thou promisest, and I will open the vessel. I do not believe thou wilt dare to break such an oath." The genie swore to him, upon which the fisherman immediately took off the covering of the vessel. At that instant the smoke ascended, and the genie, having resumed his form, the first thing he did was to kick the vessel into the sea. This action alarmed the fisherman. "Genie," said he, "will not you keep the oath you just now made?" The genie laughed at his fear, and answered, "Fisherman, be not afraid. I only did it to divert myself, and to see if you would be alarmed at it. But to convince you that I am in earnest, take up your nets and follow me." As he spoke these words, he walked before the fisherman, who, having taken up his nets, followed him, but with some distrust. They passed by the town and came to the top of a mountain, from whence they descended into a vast plain, which brought them to a lake that lay betwixt 4 hills. When they reached the side of the lake, the genie said to the fisherman, "Cast in your nets and catch fish." The fisherman did not doubt of taking some, because he saw a great number in the water, but he was extremely surprised when he found they were of 4 colors: white, red, blue, and yellow. He threw in his nets and brought out one of each color. Having never seen the like before, he could not but admire them, and judging that he might get a considerable sum for them, he was very joyful. "Carry those fish," said the genie to him, "and present them to your sultan. He will give you more money for them. You may come daily to fish in this lake, but I give you warning not to throw in your nets above once a day, otherwise you will repent." Having spoken thus, he struck his foot upon the ground, which opened, and after it had swallowed him up, closed again. The fisherman, being resolved to follow the genie's advice, forbore casting in his nets a second time, and returned to the town very well satisfied, and making 1,000 reflections upon his adventure. He went immediately to the Sultan's palace to offer his fish, and His Majesty was much surprised when he saw the wonders which the fisherman presented. He took them up one after another and viewed them with attention, and after having admired them a long time, "Take those fish," said he to his vizier, "and carry them to the cook, whom the Emperor of the Greeks has sent me. I cannot imagine but that they must be as good as they are beautiful." The vizier carried them as he was directed, and delivering them to the cook, said, "Here are 4 fish just brought to the Sultan. He orders you to dress them." He then returned to the Sultan, who commanded him to give the fisherman 400 pieces of gold, which he did accordingly. The fisherman, who had never seen so much money, could scarcely believe his good fortune, but thought the whole must be a dream, until he found it otherwise by being able to provide necessaries for his family with the produce of his nets. As soon as the Sultan's cook had cleaned the fish, she put them upon the fire in a frying pan with oil, and when she thought them fried enough on one side, she turned them upon the other. But, oh, monstrous prodigy! Scarcely were they turned, when the wall of the kitchen divided, and a young lady of wonderful beauty entered from the opening. She held a rod in her hand, and was clad in flowered satin, with pendants in her ears, a necklace of large pearls, and bracelets of gold set with rubies. She moved toward the frying pan to the great amazement of the cook, and striking one of the fish with the end of the rod, said, "Fish, fish, are you in your duty?" The fish having answered nothing, she repeated these words, and then the 4 fish lifted up their heads and replied, "Yes, yes, if you reckon, we reckon. If you pay your debts, we pay ours. If you fly, we overcome, and are content." As soon as they had finished these words, the lady overturned the frying pan, and returned into the open part of the wall, which closed immediately, and became as it was before. The cook was greatly frightened at what had happened, and coming a little to herself, went to take up the fish that had fallen on the hearth, but found them blacker than coal, and not fit to be carried to the Sultan. This grievously troubled her, and she fell to weeping most bitterly. "Alas," said she, "what will become of me? If I tell the Sultan what I have seen, I am sure he will not believe me, but will be enraged against me." While she was thus bewailing herself, the Grand Vizier entered, and asked her if the fish were ready. She told him all that had occurred, which we may easily imagine astonished him, but without speaking a word of it to the Sultan, he invented an excuse that satisfied him, and sending immediately for the fisherman, bid him bring 4 more such fish, for a misfortune had befallen the others, so that they were not fit to be carried to the royal table. The fisherman, without saying anything of what the genie had told him, told the vizier he had a great way to go for them, in order to excuse himself from bringing them that day, but said that he would certainly bring them on the morrow.